I want to ask you, who is the next President of the United States of America?
Thank you very much. What a nice reception. What a nice day today, too.
Amen.
You know, one of the rules of the campaign is we're supposed to have a lot of fun. Looks like we're going to have a lot of fun here today. Thank you for coming out. But it has been a real great experience in this campaign. I've never been bashful at admitting that I was a bit reluctant to get into the campaign. I was really skeptical and wondered whether there would be enough people who would respond favorably, whether there were enough people who still cared about the Constitution. I didn't know how the young people would respond. Just like that, everybody's been responding very favorably, so I have been very pleased with the reception. Thank you. The great thing that we've noticed as we travel around the country and we have our rallies is that we bring a lot of people together. People who haven't been involved in campaigns before, young people, the older people, the people who are Republicans, the people who used to be Republicans, there's a few of those around, and people who are independents, people who have never been involved before. Democrats will even come out too. We love that. It's really to me a testimonial to our Constitution. Because it isn't me that's necessarily doing this, because what I talk about is freedom in the Constitution. And freedom invites people to come together, because all of a sudden freedom means that we allow you to lead your own life the way you want. And nobody wants to tell you. The government shouldn't be telling you how to lead your life, nor should you be telling your neighbor. But it means that we should live peaceably, but be tolerant and live with people. So this brings people together. Not only would we allow people to lead their lives as they choose, but we'd let you spend your money the way you want also. Most people know we're not supposed to tell our neighbors how they spend their money, but our government tells us too often how we're going to spend our money, and that's what we need to change. The consequence of that philosophy, that we have a right to our life and our liberty and to pursue our happiness and to keep our fruits of labor, you know what kind of tax code we'd have? That would mean we wouldn't have an income tax or an IRS. Of course would be the goal. Matter of fact, on the way over here from the airport, I was just doing a radio interview up in Minnesota, and the question was, well, what would you do without the income tax? How could the government exist? Well, why don't we just look back at before 1913? We did fine. We did all right without an income tax. What do you have to do? You have to have a lot less government is what you have to have. One thing is if we want to get rid of the income tax, we do have to start talking about constitutional government. And the one thing is we would have a different foreign policy. The founders were very clear about foreign policy. We weren't, and the advice was clear. There was no authority to police the world, but the advice was stay out of the internal affairs of other nations. Stay out of entangling alliances. You know, entangling alliances like the UN, I don't think we need things like that. Been just this administration, but if we go back probably to Woodrow Wilson, where they had this grandiose idea that we could make the world safe for democracy. Since that time, just think how the world has suffered from this scheme that we're to go around the world making the world safe for democracy. We're less safe. We spent money. We now are in 130 countries around the world. We have 700 bases around the world, and we can't even afford to keep them going unless we borrow money from China. I'd say it's time for a change. Nation building doesn't work, and obviously it hasn't been working in the Middle East. This is why I have taken a very clear stand. And it hasn't been just since the war started that I have spoken out against it. The first legislation that was passed dealing with Iraq was as early as 1998, under the previous administration, where they said there will be regime change, that will be our policy. And I strongly objected to it. I said, this is going to lead to war and we shouldn't be doing this. So eventually they got their war. But I sense the same thing happening right now with Iran. We don't need any more war. We need less war, and we need to bring those troops home.
Yeah.
And since our country is technically insolvent, we are bankrupt, we couldn't pay our bills that we have to, the income is just minimal compared to the expenditures. We spend $800 billion every year more than we produce. We have to depend on China and Japan and the Middle East for those funds, so they could bring us to our knees anytime they want. And that is why, of course, when countries overextend themselves, whether they spend too much on a welfare system or socialism, or they spend too much on an empire that they develop, what usually happens is the currency is destroyed. And this is exactly what is happening to us today. Right now, the Canadian dollar is stronger than the American dollar. Some of the currencies around the world that you would never dream would be stronger, and they're gaining against the dollar. That means we're living way beyond our means, and we have to change our policies. We have to change the foreign policy. Not only should we be bringing troops home from the Middle East, but why do we still have troops in Korea? They've been there since the 1950s. We have troops in Japan, we have troops in Europe, and when you keep troops in an area, you send the money over there, and when the military personnel has income, they spend the money over there. That's an all drain on our economy. Then we end up borrowing that money back. And also, because of the monetary system and because of our trade agreements, we have exported our jobs, and we need to get the jobs back here at home.
Yeah.
There's one subject that I've talked about since the very first time I ran for Congress way back in the early 70s, because I became fascinated with it in economics. And it's something that is now a prominent part of this campaign, especially because we talk about it. And I've already mentioned it has to do with the value of the dollar. There's a very key issue that we have to deal with. But the problem comes from that institution that was created also in 1913 that we also have to get rid of, and that is the Federal Reserve System. The media generally comes at me and tries to make fun. Oh, you're the one that believes in the gold standard. No, I believe in the Constitution. Oh, yeah, you want to go back to these old days. I said, and they ridicule and mock the idea that the dollar should be backed by something. But don't you think it's rather foolish to think that you can defend paper as money? You just print it when you need more of it, and you turn it over to the power of the government, a government we don't generally trust, and just think they're going to maintain the value of the money. I think that is an ancient, foolish idea. It's been around for centuries. Paper money has never worked. Any country has ever tried it, eventually the money goes to zero. And I'm afraid we're working our way into that type of a situation where the dollar is going to keep going down, which is going to make every American much poorer. It can create political chaos if that happens. So therefore, we are at a point where we have to live within our means. And I am very excited about the fact that the young people are responding to this message. But then again, why shouldn't they? They're inheriting this mess and all these bills, so why shouldn't they be looking at these things?
Amen.
For young people to come and look at these issues and be supportive and come up to me afterwards, and I'll ask them, I'll say, why are you supporting me for the presidency? They say, I like your stand on the Constitution. That's great. They're really interested in that.